People don't really understand it until you actually see it coming at you in rural Australia.
We are at a unique point in human history. Due to the scientific genius of men and women, we can either, on the one hand, improve the standard and quality of life of all mankind, or we can destroy the planet as we know it.
The time has come to say fair's fair, to pay the rent, to pay our share. The time has come, a fact's a fact, it belongs to them, let's give it back. How can we dance when our worth is turning?
We have never lost so much property.
How do we sleep while our beds are burning? How can we dance when our worth is turning? How do we sleep?
The Aboriginal community have had a long history of fire management.
When Aboriginal people first saw wildfire, they were stunned.
You've got to do the right thing by country, and you've got to support that country, and otherwise you don't have identity, and you don't have a healthy landscape, you can't survive.
We burn grass when it's properly dry, but what are we going to do when the whole world fires?
There's everything to be gained, nothing to be lost. And Aboriginal people had a history of achievement. Let's learn from them.
From Kintor East to Yuндaboo, the Western Desert lives and breathes in 45 degrees.
Time has come to say fair's fair, to pay the rent, to pay our share. The time has come, a fact's a fact.
We've got each other.
It belongs to them, let's give it back. How can we dance when our worth is turning? How do we sleep while our beds are burning? How can we dance when our worth is turning?
What are we going to do when the whole world fries?
How do we sleep while our beds are burning? How can we dance when our worth is turning? How do we sleep while our beds are burning?
This is about the younger people coming on behind you. Are they going to have a habitable world? We've got to do our very best to ensure that they do.
How do we sleep while our beds are burning?
That was Julia Stone's interpretation of Beds Are Burning. I'm sure you all know it from Midnight Oil. Very powerful. And just staying with that theme, Tyson speaking at the beginning of the conference, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians in this land, the Wurundjeri people, and their elders, past and present. I did some research on where we are right now today, and we're actually on a very important location for the Wurundjeri people, and this was a meeting place for the people of the Kulin Nation to come and meet with them. And as Tyson talked about this morning, partner, work together, collaborate, not for me versus them, but us, we working together for our planet. And we've got so many lessons we can take from the Aboriginal culture in our country, but also in other countries around the world. Let's take it on board, but learn not only about what they do, things like cool burning and looking after nature, but how they partner. Again, building on Tyson's stuff. And how we think is a key part of this, and that's what I'll be talking about today, and I'll give a bit more insight as we go forward. But imagine this is you right now, holding that camera, taking that photo. You might or might not be able to work out that there are 3 rhinos there in the distance. They're about 5 kilometers away, let's say, for the sake of argument. How are you feeling? You're standing there, holding this camera, and I'm inviting you to just put yourself there for a moment. And how are you feeling as 3 multi-ton rhinos are jogging down a road towards you, 5 kilometers away? I'm going to guess that you're not actually too concerned, but a little bit thinking. Now they've been trotted along for a few minutes and you're still standing there. They haven't detracted from their path, and they are going maybe a kilometer away from you. How are you feeling now? A little bit more nervous, perhaps. But imagine when we get to the next point. Whoops. When we get there. They're only a few hundred meters away from us, and we are in that traditional fight, flight, freeze or fawn. But we can't fight them, and we can't fawn and go, "Oh, I'm okay." So what we can do is we can either run or freeze. But unfortunately, we most often freeze. And that's what's happened. We talk about data. We talk about that a lot. But we don't actually look at it. When you look at what's happened to businesses around the world, and obviously I'm using Blockbusters versus Netflix here, there's only 2 years between them seeing a trend happening and it actually collapsing. For those of you who've been here long enough and know Dick Smith's, similar happened with them. And more relevant to where I'm going today is what Nokia did. They got quite high up their little chain, and they were doing very well. And they hovered around, saw what was good, bad, changed a bit around the top, around, what's this, 2007. But when things were starting to go awry, they had stopped listening to their employees. Their employees were saying, "We've got these great ideas, we can do this, we can do that," but they'd stopped. They'd got a bit lazy. And that's what I'm saying society and we are all doing, and we can take these things away into our day jobs. Because when we look at the climate change and what's happened to our planet at the moment, it is going off the scales. It's gone well past that. And where we are, you can see the history there. That's 2,000 years cooler than where we've been just in the last 15 or 25 years. And we've got a long way, and that's, by the way, 2019. And this year, as you may or may not know, has been recorded as the hottest year in recorded history. We have averaged 1.5 degrees, which is way off that scale. And we've actually hit 2 degrees for one day last month. So, yeah, we've got some big data. But the good news is we can do something about it. When you look at the experiment that's been happening over the last 4 years since COVID started, we've actually seen what society and businesses and governments can actually put in place when we need to. It's just that this one, like the rhino, is too far away. We don't see the disasters, even though they're happening left, right, and center. So what can we change? And we can change. We can think about which path we take. So this is a good segue for me to give a quick introduction to myself. Obviously, I think you've worked out by name. My name's Alan Taylor. I've been an Agile coach for about 8 years, and I actually changed my path about a year ago, having started on my coaching career about 4 years ago. It's actually about when COVID started. I decided to go for coaching accreditation, to do one-on-one coaching and team coaching at a deeper level than we usually do in most of our Agile work. Through that, I came across a lot of people who were... I'm going to get this clicker working, I really am. There we go. I met people who introduced me to the Climate Coaching Alliance. This was founded by 3 ladies, 2 in the UK and 1 here, in Adelaide. She actually spoke at the last conference in May in Adelaide, and I interviewed her last week on the last Clubhouse, Josie McLean. That's about 6,000 or 8,000 people in that globally now. And that was starting me on my new journey. Where there was a group being set up in there around the climate coaches. We didn't have a name at the time. It was a group of people who wanted to experiment and see what is making that change not happen. Why are we not actually acting on saving the planet? And I'll share a little bit about the data on that in a bit. But we set up some research group, and that's what I'll be sharing with you today. Because we were thinking, well, what can be done and why? One of the things that we can do is think about, so what I'm going to be going through today is what we went through in the research, what the process was, and give you an opportunity to think about how that can play into what you do in your agile world, but of course in other things. Because just like the talk next door by Danielle, who was talking about cognitive ways of thinking critically, these things all play into everything we do. But I want to start now actually with a question to you folks. When you hear the word sustainability, what does it mean to you? I've got 3 different definitions. That's the first of 3. And they're all valid, so there's no wrong answer. I'd like you to put your hand up if this is what you feel is the definition of sustainability for you. It's about sustaining economic viability, you know, like I mentioned, Nokia and so on. Please put your hand up if that's what you feel sustainability is to you. Very interesting, thank you. Who would say it's minimizing the environmental impact? About just over half. Thank you very much for your response. Who would say it's more around balancing economic, social, and environmental considerations? Yeah, I'd say that's probably nearly everybody there. It's getting a good balance. And that's where I believe too, because that's why my brand name is 3P Impact. People, planet, and profit. If we actually get mutual benefits, then we're going to get more wins. Let's look for those wherever we can. What happened there? Yeah. So next question. Who here has heard of the Sustainable Development Goals? Only a few. Thank you. So to give a very short version of that, the Sustainable Development Goals were created back in originated from the 1992, where United Nations went, hey, we've got problems around the world. We've got problems with poverty, the environment, and all of those sorts of things. Well, what can we do about it? Let's actually do something about it. And so it went through iterations, and you can see from the history here, it was 2012 before it actually started to get any momentum and get real structure. That's 20 years of talk. The bottom date is 2016 was when the climate accord was signed in Paris. 2016 it came into effect. You may or may not know that actually right now, as we're speaking, there's the Conference of Parties is the COP. COP28 is actually happening in Dubai, where they're trying to talk about, well, what's happened? And invariably, it's going to be, no, we haven't got far enough. So where did we start with our research? Now, this is where we get through a little bit more tangible stuff that you'll probably see with any Agile project you might have run, especially if you've done design thinking. Well, what started us off? Well, a group of scientists, predominantly scientists and business people in Sweden, thought, hang on a minute, we haven't gone very quickly, even in 2020. So has anybody here heard of the Inner Development Goals? Just a couple. Thank you, guys. It's basically a framework around psychology and coaching to help us learn. And where this came about, it's a technical issue. That screen's working, but this one's given up. Okay. So I don't know what's going on there. It's got to be sent to testers, you know. It checks to see how well I remember what I was going to talk about. So this is good. So let's go back to where was I? I was talking about the Inner Development Goals and how so when we started using the Inner Development Goals as our target for setting out why are we doing it, what are we doing. They were finding lots of research that was showing that we weren't actually moving from intent to action. We were actually more about getting something, you know, talking about it. So what we did from there was we thought, well, okay, that's set us up with what we're doing. What other research can we do? Well, there was research, oh good, that's coming up, so that'll give me a reminder even if I'm talking about things. I've forgotten which slide that one is. Oh, good. Yeah, that's right. So what we found was there was research done by Bain, a huge consultancy, And they did research in 2017 into what's going on. And 98% of sustainability initiatives were failing. 98%. I mean, you hear about waterfall versus agile, it knocks it into the dust. And yet 81% of the employees actually, 83% of the initiatives actually had some value. So it's worthwhile doing, but they're failing. So why don't we ramp it up? Some further research by Accenture later on, they found that in 2022, Accenture went, no, 93% are failing, so we're still not doing well. And it gets even better when Microsoft did research well, that's actually backwards, that's back in 2021. Microsoft pulled out a really good point, that organizations are not moving strategy into action. What's that tell you? It's lots of thinking, lots of talking, lots of plans, but not bringing it to action. And that's an inner problem for us humans. We're good at talking, but actually overcoming our fears and overcoming our things, collaborating. It's not quite on the same page, but let's find out a way that we can. That's too hard. Please.
Should we pivot?
That's a good idea. Yeah. Let's be agile. Let's be agile and innovative. Good on you. Thank you. So you can see that was shown, with unable to turn strategy into action, and the in-house skills weren't being built. So how can we build better in-house skills? Well, most of these are transferable skills. It's like a C# developer trying to learn Java. They're similar enough. You can learn the new skills without completely changing everything. Of course, now we've gone a long way away from the clicker. So what we then thought, well, let's do the next bit of our research. How are we going to get this research into what our audience are? We're going to do research into how we can prove a better way of getting people on board. And by the way, we are talking genuine research. It's a peer-reviewed paper. And what we thought was, what metrics are we going to use? Well, I mentioned the inner development goals. This was perfect because they provided a framework for us. There's 5 dimensions to it. About inner being. Who are you? What am I? Myself. What do I feel? What are my experiences? What are my emotions? We've then got the next one, thinking. Thinking cognitively, that means everything from systems thinking to actually thinking about problems in different ways than our traditional, that's how it's always done before. Let's use our brains a bit more. That centered on that, we've also got relating. How do we care about this? What is our relationship to it? So, yes, I feel about that, but I can see these other things, and we can go deeper. And these all enable us to collaborate, because when we can empathize with others, we can empathize with the situation that we're in, and we understand ourselves, we can actually collaborate, which enables to do the last one, acting. Now, this looks like a sequence, and it does play in a sequence in a way, but they're all skills with multiple facets within them, as is demonstrated by the next bit, which is the 23 skills, and they wrap up into so many which are dissected. You can look if you look for IDG, I think it's idg.org, but if you look up inner development goals online, you'll see this whole framework with tools to help us learn and grow at the same time. So there's lots of knowledge there. We used it in this context as, well, how can we create surveys which we can test this perspective from people? Let's use that. Awesome. So we did that. But then we went and talked and interviewed companies that might be interested in joining the research. And we think, well, what do they want? What's important to them? This was early last year, early 2021. And there was the Great Resignation starting. There was this fear that where is everybody going to be? So belonging became really important. So we added to our survey the 5 dimensions plus belonging. I belong to this organization. Now, I've spoken to 2 people this morning working with organizations here that exemplify that, both from a cultural work in general, but also in their way of working, and they are both Culture Amp and REA. 2 brilliant examples of companies which actually care about these things and embody it. If we can do that more with organizations, and they wanted to do that. So how do we actually take this model? By the way, I'd need to add a little bit about this research group. We've got Dr. Jonathan Rhodes. He's a lecturer and professor at university in the UK. University of Plymouth. He was leading it from an academic front, so we've got the psychology space there. He, by the way, he does things like trains politicians, governments, and top athletes. So, you know, we've got some very, very clever people on the team. But it wasn't just him. It was a collaborative affair and how we came up with this framework. Is that meaning? We've got the two levels. As Tyson was talked about, the me and the we, or the I and us. But starting with I, what does this mean to me? Whether it is a picture, we used a lot of imagery. I see a beautiful picture of an animal. What does that mean to me? I see some rubbish in the street. What does that mean to me? And it can be at everything about our lives. We take that and then we build on it and we say, well, okay, what's around that? Where do I fit? What is the awareness of that system I'm playing in? And so an example might be, I see some throwaway plastic cup just on the street. Yes, that bugs me because I know that the damage that is doing throughout its whole life cycle. That's my meaning. But my awareness is, yep, somebody's bought that, they might have dropped it. I'm aware that it's been left there and it might get washed into the sea. But then I can move now to purpose. My purpose now is, well, one, I can stop myself doing that by using a keep cup. I've got my other purpose that sometimes I will actually walk past them and pick them up. That's my purpose. But then I can go through, and so then I get to my action of actually doing it. And then we can take that round to our groups, to the people we're collaborating with, whether they're our team, our family, our friends, or community. And discuss that with them and get them and their meaning on the same page. Get that understanding, common agreement, so that you can actually build that awareness of what can be done, how we can move forward. And we use that through all of our work. And that's part of what helped me move and change my job when I set my business up last year. But how do we put the research together? What we did was, well, like any research, you need a control group. The control group went through training. The training was carbon literacy training. There's a URL there. You can learn about what carbon literacy is. You can learn about what we mean by carbon footprint, what the impact of what we do is, emissions front, and what we bury. That was a really cool course, but not everybody did it. Our groups went through the MAP training, the training that I've just walked through, that mindset. We put a framework, which I'll talk about in a minute, ran them both. And before we did all of the actual sessions, we got everybody on board to do a test, to go through the survey. If you want to do the survey, that URL at the bottom, theclimatecoaches.com, is there. That's our webpage where you can actually do this survey yourself, and you'll end up with a graph in a report along those lines. So this gave us the framework. We've got the measures, we've got the metrics, we know what customers are after. So let's go and test it. Let's put the program together. Cool. And here's where there's another little gem in what we did. You can see up here, values at all levels. The first phase of the obviously we've done the interviews and we've done the surveys, but what we've done is got values at all levels, and we started with the execs. These are big organizations. And we've got the executives in the room, and we were thinking, well, what are your values? What is important to you? And that was everything from, of course, making the business work, to earning money for themselves, for the environment, their families. And we collated that into the top bunch of what is most important, with connection to other things I haven't got on this slide. We used imagery, so you can see. When we see things and we feel them, we are far more connected to them. But the beauty of this was, it wasn't just doing it at the exec level and then taking a form and saying, yes, this is what the exec said. We had one of the execs walk into the room and give the introduction to the participants in the program and explicitly call out, this is what we found. The genuine, I am engaged in this, I am bought into this, I'm leaving you alone now, but hey, we have done our bit. And that gave a genuine trust to the participants. They believed that they were in a safe experiment, that they could go through. And what they were doing was, they were connecting in the same way, and then we were building on that with things like systems thinking and how to connect to nature. We gave very little actual information to them. It was more around that coaching mindset. What is important? How is this working? How are you doing this? And that was just amazing. I'll come to the results in a minute, but it was an amazing experience just seeing that pennies dropping all the way. And with that connection with the leadership, they were buying into it. Now, what I haven't mentioned yet is the range of people in this research. I mentioned the execs, but the people in the program were everywhere from graduate to director level. Very diverse, even in the same little groups. So what we then went through, you'll recognize these little things. They were like little sprints. After we'd given them about 6 hours of training, coached training, we've put them into little cycles, like a sprint. Go away for 2 weeks as a group, and we split them into little groups of 3. Take that away, see how you go, and feedback. And then we'll have some what are effectively retrospectives at the end of that cycle. There were wonderful discussions because they felt safe in this space, even though we had a hierarchy within these groups. And the group one of the groups I was coaching had literally a graduate and a director and a middle manager in. And yet they were open. They were actually willing to call out what was blocking them, what the challenges were, and where they could be. And if you've ever experienced anything like that, then you'll see where that is so powerful. Most of the time we stay at the very top level and very thin layer of, yeah, that's what we can do. We don't get into the why. And where we saw some of the wins with this, towards the end, but throughout the program, we looked at our reflections. And there's just a few of the big wins that we saw. We're seeing that managers were willing to explore what could be done. This case in point here is, have you ever seen, quick question to everybody, have you ever seen senior management meetings where there's lots of food and then they take it out and they leave it in the kitchen for it to hopefully get eaten? Yeah? I wonder how many of you like seeing that. Sometimes it's good because some of that food is quite nice, but you see it getting wasted. And so what was aware for this particular manager was like, oh, I see this food being wasted. But through that cycle, they got their meaning, they hated it. The awareness was what the reasons were, who to involve, and where the cycle was. Okay, so now I've got that real comprehension. They're able to have a constructive conversation with the office manager and work out what the options were. And so between them, going through that little loop I mentioned, they're able to go, hang on, we could actually just drop the amount of food we've got. We know we've got too much. And we're doing it for a good reason. We're not just doing it to save money, although that's an added bonus. That meant that they could do it, and they had good conversation points with those stakeholders that came into those meetings. And that was a positive on all fronts. So there we find those, whereas normally we go, me right, you right, you know? And we saw, so that was, and we weren't telling them to do this. This was just through this process of enabling that thought process. Big, hairy, audacious goals. We talk about hackathons and stuff like that, but quite often they are quite minimal. This was, one of the groups decided that we've got to get the whole business far more electric vehicles. It was a big, hairy goal, and it was too big for the type of business it was. But it was worth trying. And they gave it a go, and then they came back and regrouped. And there was no blame. There was none of that. I know we talk about no blame culture, but it's quite hard to actually really get going. So that was wonderful to see. And then the glass ceiling. Even one of the media managers, who normally, you think, we all think that we are able to be better than we are or to do what we're doing. And that includes medium to senior managers. But he was aware that he didn't really know what the sustainability plan for the company was. Yes, they've got big reports, but that is too difficult to decipher, and where is his scope? And rather than going, oh, I don't know, he was like, why don't I just actually ask the CSO then? Okay, he's in a different continent. These guys were in the UK. The CSO was in the US. But that was fine. I'll go invest in him. And he did. So these sorts of things are examples. And then when we get to the quantitative version, say we did the test at the end, the people who'd actually gone through this program with us had a 9% increase in their cognitive load. They're able to think better by 9%. That's huge. There was no significant well, there was actually a 0.01 drop in the group who only did training. They had more knowledge, but knowledge is only useful when we can actually use it. And so I'm not saying one is better than the other. I am saying that we actually need both. helping ourselves grow. So where's the future? We've got to remember that graph at the very beginning before the technical. We're back up actually. So thank you for getting that back up. I'll stay here now though. Where is the future? Well, first of all, global regulations are ramping up. I'm sure you all know the GPRD that came out a few years ago was a European invention, and it impacted everything here. New regulations like the ESRS in Europe is going to do the same. I already know of one company here in Australia that has struggled to do an export, to put a bid in for some government work in Europe because they needed to get their environmental details up to speed. So we're losing we need to do it. Workplace engagement. If you're engaged in this and you've got people buying in, then you've got satisfaction. What I didn't mention earlier is the number of people who are struggling. Well, actually, I did touch on the metrics earlier. People want to be involved. Well, why not engage them? There's business opportunities because, do you all know Mike Cannon-Brookes? Yep, a few nodding heads, a couple of blank looks. So Mike Cannon-Brookes is the owner and founder of Atlassian, Jira, and so he was speaking at Careers in Net Zero conference only a couple of weeks ago, explaining how there's going to be 100,000 extra jobs created by the sustainability work. And when you see how much IT has a part to play in it, it's massive. So there's opportunities here and there for everyone, and businesses can adapt. But you can also save money. Things like the food waste. Things like this are opportunities. There's lots of them around business to get more savings, get staff retention, especially Gen Z and millennials. Massive opportunity. Reduce risks and future-proof. So these are all where the businesses can go. I'm still on my path. I'm in an early journey. I'm still going to be continuing with the work I'm doing with the climate coaches. We had a meeting only yesterday where we're getting excited about what 2024 is going to bring and what we can bring to help the rest of the world. I'm also a co-convener and an organizer for these two groups in Australia, the Inner Development Goals and the Climate Coaching Alliance. Seeing that we need to do this at all levels, I'm partnering with a lady in Brisbane, Cherry Ward. We're partnering around we've created a program for senior leaders and executives to help them see that mindset and see how they can engage their senior stakeholders around their businesses and make progress with this, because we need it to start at the top. We need to get more information to people. So I'm working with a guy in MIC 8 in Geelong. We're going to be basically doing a communication experiment with things from podcasts to e-learning. Since e-learning, I'm sure some of you have seen some of the e-learning programs, and they can be seriously tedious. We're aware of that, and so we are very keen and he's got experience in doing these sort of things in very humorous and engaging ways so that you actually want to do it. Not quite gamification, but along those lines. Get that on board. And then I'm working with a guy here in Melbourne, Peter Brace. We're working on trying to help organizations embed this. So this is where we're going. Question is, thank you all for staying around, especially with the technical issues. I really appreciate it. I'm wondering, this is not something you have to answer, but of course it'd be great if you have got any answers. But what is your superpower that you want to take forward in this world, that you can take away from today and think, actually, I can go and do that? It's food for thought. Maybe it's more of a rhetorical question, but it is moving from intent to action that's the hard bit. And thinking through these things is where we can do more of, and we can feel better versions of ourselves when we do. Does anybody have any questions? I know we are going a bit over. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Hey, I'll get you to use this.
I was really interested, Josh before talked about CEOs owning the operational model to be successful in kind of rolling out. I'm assuming that's also ideal here, but who are you commonly seeing from your experience actually owning this space within an organization to drive the change?
That's a very interesting question, and I can't answer it particularly well because there's a lot of opaqueness. We've got a series of roles around organizations. The Chief Sustainability Officer is a title that does exist, and they're sometimes driving it, but quite often they have got competing roles. They're chief financial officer or chief HR officer, and sometimes they are so competitive, those two roles, that I'm not too sure really how much I believe on either side, because we also know there's a lot of greenwashing. On a positive side, we have got a lot of sustainability managers out there who are effectively change managers. You know, they're doing the metrics, they're getting the data, but they are starting to talk to people and see how to buy them in. So it's a vague answer, but unfortunately it's because there is not clarity on that type of role and how it's going, but it's adapting, it's evolving in this early days.
So incredibly variable depending on the organisation and the structures and the intents, basically.
Very well summarised, thank you.
Well done for not saying it depends. Anyone else? We're going to lunch now, but, you know, because we had a little bit of a break, you know, just ask away and...
Yeah, I'll still be around, and please feel free to contact me. But for perspective...
Oh, yeah. do it. It's good.
So thank you all. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Big hand, because...